Hello, everyone. Oh my goodness. Here we are, Joe and Kat Chats, in for another episode. Oh my goodness. Today, we're talking about the inauguration. We're talking about Biden's cabinet. This is happening this week. We better get to know these people for the next 4 years. Yeah, here it is. Joe, I think we've seen that mask before. What does it say?
It says, "Stop killing Black people in defense of Black lives. Defund police. Defund the police. It is important that we stand up for Black lives. It is important that we stand up for Indigenous lives. It is important that we stand up for people of color. Police genocide, police homicide, police murder is still rampant in this country. The unequal treatment of Black people in the United States has always been a situation in the United States and was made even more apparent almost 2 weeks ago with the insurrection that took place in Washington, D.C. It is important that we make sure that we stand with the least of these. We stand with the downtrodden. We stand with the most marginalized people of this country and around the world. And my mask is a way of representing the ideals of this show and what we are about here on the Joe and Kat Chats enterprise.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much for saying that. That was incredible. And I absolutely agree with all of that.
You're very welcome.
Yeah. And the snaps, someone asked me actually recently, they saw someone snapping in agreement. It's a silent way of agreeing, or a low volume way of agreeing with what someone's saying.
Exactly.
Out of the poetry or poetry.
It's also done in spoken word poetry. It's also seen in spoken word poetry instead of going,
yeah,
or
yeah.
It.
Yeah,
Exactly.
It's like a way of acknowledging and clapping without making a lot of noise. So
exactly.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Okay. Yeah.
But in
I
contrast, without making a whole lot of noise, what we are going to do today is make a whole lot of noise with today's episode.
Yeah, I very much agree, and I'm looking forward to it. I know that you mentioned on your stories earlier on Instagram that you are on fire today and you're feeling good. So, are you still feeling that way?
Look, the fire burns hot. I'm 112 degrees in the shade right now. Hot.
Beautiful.
Like a pizza. How are you, Kat Wells?
Yeah, no, I'm doing well, and I'm also looking forward to this episode because I think, although I am in Canada and I don't have these people as my leaders of my country, this election, all of the U.S. politics deeply affect Canadians. So yeah, so it's really important to talk about for those of us above the border as well here in Canada.
Absolutely. And there's a lot to talk about. We are recording this episode today on January 19, 2021. As you can see on the bottom there, it says Joe and Kat Chats, episode 32, Biden's cabinet and the inauguration. We're going to spend a couple of minutes talking about the pending inauguration taking place tomorrow on January 20, 2021 in the nation's capital, Washington, District of Columbia, otherwise known as D.C. If you want to learn more about what Kat Wells and I do on a day-to-day basis, you can find me at these following social media outlets. And you can find Kat Wells here on Instagram.com, CatWells22, because she is everywhere. We are all over the place. So again, what we want to do today is talk about the inauguration. We're going to talk about that because that's important. There's a lot happening with the inauguration of President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know you mentioned earlier that, Washington, D.C. is looking a little bit different these days. Can you describe what's going on there?
Absolutely. Right. Absolutely. I got a couple of friends of mine who live in Washington, D.C. I've received some information and some pictures about what's going on in D.C. There's over 25,000 troops in Washington, D.C. right now. That's more troops than are in the Middle East. And bear in mind, the United States, and I'm sure Canada, hasn't been in the Middle East for the better part of about 20 years. There are more troops in Washington, D.C. right now than there are in the Middle East. But we're not living in a security state, are we? No way. All of the bridges entering Washington, D.C. are blocked. So if you go over 395, if you go over the 14th Street Bridge, if you go over the Anacostia River Bridge, and again, I know these bridges because I used to live in Baltimore and I know D.C. quite well. You're not getting in by a bridge. All of the shops are boarded up and closed near the Capitol area. Airlines have stopped flying into DCA, which is a three-letter airport code for Reagan International Airport. They've slowed down the number of flights into IAD, which is Dulles International Airport. Dulles is about a 45-minute drive west of Washington, D.C., and they've slowed into BWI, Baltimore Washington International Airport, and BWI is, I'd say, about a 30-minute drive north of Baltimore. Amtrak train service into Union Station, which is the main train station into Washington, D.C. Amtrak train service is shut down. There are 11 D.C. metro stations that are around the capital area. All of those closed. Bus services around the capital area, all of the bus services have been rerouted. So when they talk about security in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area around around that area, it's crazy. It's a ton of security right now, and it's only going to get more intense as the inauguration arrives in approximately 15 hours or so.
Yeah.
Actually, a little bit more than that, more like 20 hours.
Yeah. This is wild. And I think that, I mean, this is just, just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to what is going to be implemented, or the attempts at implementing some security measures, given what did happen in early January at the Capitol with the terrorist attack and all of the domestic terrorists that breached the Capitol, basically. This is just wild, and I just foresee this becoming more and more the norm for us, which is not something that is outside of the norm for many other places. I know that you mentioned that you traveled to China a few years ago. Did you want to speak to that? Oh, I can't hear you. Okay.
I messed
You're
up. I've had
muted.
myself on mute. I know I'm not muted anymore. We're wide
Okay,
open. We're
there
wide
we
open.
go.
I'm going cat chat series. But yeah, I visited Beijing, China. I've been to China probably about 3 or 4 times now, and I've been to Beijing, I think 3 times. But one of the times I was there, I had the opportunity to visit Tiananmen Square. And I am old enough to remember June of 1989, the summer of 1989, when there were protests in Beijing, China, and the tank man, who still remains unidentified, stood in front of a tank. Tank. And it was one man who stood in front of a tank, and the tank had to move around him. And he stood in front of the tank. Whenever the tank moved, he moved in front of the tank. And that single act of one man against a state is exactly the sort of defiance that we need around the world in terms of protest. Because if one man could change the entire course of an armed protest of large Sherman tanks moving down the street in Tiananmen Square, then imagine what a movement of millions could do. But that's somewhat besides the point. The point is that area was relatively unsecured. There weren't fences, there weren't controlled entry and exit access points, there weren't metal detectors, there weren't body scanners, there wasn't any sort of over-secured area to get into Tiananmen Square. When I visited Tiananmen Square, I remember hanging out with my friend Senders, and I said, "Oh my God, this I've never seen anything like this." And I said to him, "I was like, this is more secure than Fort Knox." And Fort Knox is where you hold the gold reserves in Fort Knox, Kentucky. Tiananmen Square, I walked around that place, and there were buses full of Chinese dudes wearing green military uniforms, just sitting in buses, and they were all over the place. Cameras everywhere. There were more cameras than trees. There were more cameras than trees. And you walked around these large monuments and these large buildings in Tiananmen Square, and taking pictures was frowned upon. There was only a few places to get in and only a few places to get out. And when they checked you, they did a body scan. They put you through a metal detector. They checked your bags. And then when you left, same thing. They checked you, a body scan, metal detector, checked your bags. And then they asked to see some ID if they didn't think you were a trustworthy type of looking character. Naturally, I am a high moral character citizen. I'm a trustworthy brother. So they didn't bother asking me for ID. But some of these other cats out here that maybe looked a little bit, sketchy or so, they're like, "Hey, ID." But I don't know how to say ID in Mandarin or Cantonese. So but I knew they were asking for ID because people were pulling out passports and state government issued identification cards. But my point is, the United States Capitol, Washington, D.C., has become a panopticon. You can't move around that area without, in the words of Hall and Oates, private eyes watching you. Private eyes are watching you, and they're watching your every move, especially in the national capital area of the White House, that I think along Independence Boulevard and Independence Avenue and Constitution Avenue, and along Massachusetts Avenue and Washington Avenue. So I'm sorry, Pennsylvania Avenue. So there's a lot going on in Washington, D.C. The United States is a carceral state. It is a security state, and we're seeing the manifestations of years of over militarization play itself out today, yesterday, last week, and the week before, over the past 20 years in the Middle East, and over hundreds of years of military intervention in countries that we have no business being in. And now centuries of military intervention have come to the capital of the United States in its very own manifestation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the comparison to Tiananmen Square to what's going on right now, and just the, I guess, stating that the militarization of the country is, coming into view right now. And I think that is really important example to bring up, because Tiananmen Square has always sort of been this iconic imagery of one man against, the state, as you mentioned. And I agree that we need to have, a giant protest across the world. But I think that example is just so iconic here in North America, particularly because it is so individualistic, and it inspires those of us to know, individually fight for whatever you believe in. And I think that there is a flaw in that, in that ideology or that idea, because really, if we're going to go up against the state, we need a lot of people involved. We need the entire country, because as we're going to be talking about today, these governments are implemented. Yes, we vote for them. Yes, this all happens, but then whoever we vote for gets to implement a whole array of folks that are now going to be in control of the government over the next 4 years, and potentially beyond that, depending on what happens in 4 years. So I think that it's really important right now to understand who these people are, what they have done in the past, and which is going to inform what they're going to do in the next 4 years. And I'm critical of the government, as all of us know. So if there's anything you want to add, I think we should get into it.
No. We're definitely going to get into it. We're definitely going to get into it. And just to kind of touch on the point with the Tank Man and Tiananmen Square, there's I think it was Max Lucado had this quote. He said, "No one can do everything, but everyone can do something." And then John F. Kennedy followed that up by saying, "No one can do everything, but everyone can try." So my point is, if one man can change the entire course of a military action, millions of people can do wonderful things. This is an all hands on deck situation now more than ever. And we're going to get to some comments, because people are commenting already. To Jennifer saying, "So intense, I saw the same thing." Yep, absolutely. It's crazy how the United States government is, again, I don't want to go as far as say it's an open air prison, but you need the right credentials to get in. And if you get anywhere near that place, it's a problem. And there's a whole lot of troops with guns and military gear that are willing to shoot on sight and ask questions later. So today we've discussed the inauguration, and now we're going to go ahead and discuss Biden's cabinet. And we have about 46 minutes left. We're going to try to squeeze as many of these cabinet members in as we can, because there's a common misconception in saying, "Hey, you know what? This is Joe Biden's first term." And on paper, yes, that is true. But when we go over the cast of characters and ne'er-do-wells, misfits, charlatans, buffoons, idiots, thieves, and kleptocrats, and corporate lackeys, and warmongers, you're going to realize, whoa, this first term of Biden looks like a third term of Obama. Or if we dig even deeper, it's going to look like a fifth term of Bill Clinton, which is hard to believe, because nobody thought that the Democratic Party could move further to the right than when Clinton moved the party right back in 1992 by out-Republicaning the Republicans. But now, with Obama moving the party further right, and then Biden and this cast of this motley crew, and no disrespect to the heavy metal band from the 80s, Motley Crue, actually really liked them. They were excellent. But and that's a whole other conversation. My guilty pleasure is 80s hair band music, but that's a whole other thing.
I love it.
Oh boy. Whew, yeah, we could talk about that all night long. But look, this cast of characters, we go over them. There's a lot of people that were like, hey, anybody but Trump, I'm voting Biden no matter what. Again, we're not into voting shaming here at the Joe and Cat Chats enterprise or franchise. But what we are about is education. And if you feel bad in the morning because of the information we're presenting to you, we can't really help that. But what we can help you with is make smarter choices in the future based upon information. And that is what we are going to do today.
Yes, absolutely.
That's what we're going to do.
It's not about who you voted for, because often in any election, it's really you're voting out someone you don't like, or you're voting against someone you don't like, and the other person in this instant, who is a leader of the other major party, happened to be Biden. We've talked about him before, and we've talked about his vice president Kamala Harris before. But
yes.
Do you want to give a quick rundown on these two folks?
We're going to go over it again. We're going over it again. Joe Biden wrote the crack bill of 1998. It was called the Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1988. And it created mandatory minimum sentencing for crack users and crack dealers, 5 years in jail, no questions asked, and it completely, to borrow the phrase, handcuffed judges from actually doing their jobs. Joe Biden did that. Joe Biden wrote the Omnibus Crime Bill of 1994. We've talked about this at length. It doubled the prison population. It disproportionately locked up a whole lot of black and brown people for minor drug offenses. It spent billions of dollars for police. It built more jails. It reestablished the federal death penalty. And it criminalized non-payment of child support. Joe Biden was the main guy who wrote it. He wrote it, got on a word processor, typed it up, handed it over to Bill Clinton, and Bill Clinton put it into law. He broke the Omnibus Counterterrorism Act of 1995. It never got voted on Congress, but then when September 11th happened, that law eventually became the Patriot Act, which opened the door for mass surveillance. He wrote NAFTA. NAFTA sent hundreds of thousands of jobs overseas. It destroyed unions and increased wealth inequality. He supported the 2005 bankruptcy laws, which made discharging student loans and medical bills next to impossible. And that law is the reason why a Harvard bankruptcy law professor by the name of Elizabeth Warren got involved in politics. Elizabeth Warren was teaching bankruptcy law and economics law at Harvard University. She got pissed off about this bill and was like, you know what, I'm going to do something about it. And that's how Elizabeth Warren eventually became a state senator. If not for this draconian bankruptcy bill, there's probably not Elizabeth Warren as a state senator in Massachusetts. Let's not forget, Joe Biden supported the cutting of welfare, most specifically the AFDC program, the Aid for Families with Dependent Children. He took food out of kids' mouths and took health care away from sick kids. Okay? And let's not forget, Joe Biden was Obama's vice president for all of the crazy stuff Obama did. Obama took us from 2 wars to 7. Obama gave us a Republican health care plan. Obama gassed brown people at the border. Obama sprayed freezing cold water against the people at Standing Rock. Obama went ahead and put a whole bunch of troops on the Occupy Wall Street protesters and bashed the heads in of those protesters in New York City, Los Angeles, Chicago, Baltimore, Philadelphia, Seattle. You name it, he did it. So this is all stuff that Joe Biden did while he was riding shotgun with Obama, in addition to all the stuff that he did in his 36-year tenure as a senator in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, and really, correct me if I'm wrong, but all of those policies that he wrote or implemented or participated in with Obama sound pretty far right to me. They sound pretty conservative. They sound pretty Republican. So what you said at the top of the show is like becoming a lot more obvious now that you've outlined a few of those things.
Yeah,
just saying.
I mean, in all seriousness, again, we voted 2008. We voted in we voted in a Democrat, and they do Republican stuff. In 2016,
Exactly.
we voted Republican. They do Republican stuff. In between Clinton and Obama, we had a Republican, and Bush did a whole lot of stuff that continued on what Clinton did. And then in 2008, we said, oh, yeah, hope change, yes, we can. And what did we do? We ended up with a Democrat that did a whole lot of stuff that Bush did, and then took it to the next level. So,
yeah.
And again, so it may not necessarily matter if a Republican has won the popular vote in one of the last, I think, 7 or 8 elections. It wouldn't necessarily matter, because what difference does it make if the Democrats are going to do the same shit that Republicans are going to do?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, we've had conversations about the problematic circumstance of our governments in general. The system is broken. We both have expressed that it needs a complete overhaul. But this is what we have right now, and we're going to have to live with it. So the first couple of things you mentioned there with Biden had to do with, the judicial system. And
Yes.
we've talked about Kamala Harris before. She has... Yeah.
Oh my God.
She's very related to those, is what I'm trying to say.
Kamala Harris is the reason, Joe Biden is the reason why a political figure like Kamala Harris exists. Because
Right.
Kamala Harris is a neoliberal shapeshifter that is the black face of white supremacy. I'm going to say that again, because sometimes I say stuff that goes over people's heads. And again, my head is nice and moisturized and it's slick. So, slides right off. I'm going to say it again. Joe Biden is the reason that Kamala Harris exists, because Kamala Harris is the black face of white supremacy. No different than Obama. And look at all the crazy stuff that Kamala Harris did. When Kamala Harris, during the first 3 years of Kamala Harris's tenure as San Francisco's district attorney, convictions for drug offenses went up from 52% to 67%. She declined to pursue a ballot initiative that would have abolished the death penalty in California. Okay, Kamala Harris did all this. When Kamala Harris was San Francisco district attorney, a lab technician stole some cocaine from evidence, and then the lab technician corrupted the evidence. Harris and her team tried to cover up the theft of the cocaine and the mishandling of the evidence, and not inform the defense attorneys on the other side that had these cases against them. As a result, over 1,000 criminal cases got thrown out. 1,000 criminal cases got thrown out. And for all my law students and law professors and legal minds and legal eagles out there, when the prosecution withholds material facts of a case that could exonerate or materially change the course of an investigation or a case, that is what's called a Brady violation. And the last thing you want is for a defense attorney to lobby a Brady violation against the prosecution. That's terrible. That's bad shit. When somebody says, "Yo, Brady violation," come on now. That's super corrupt. And Kamala Harris not only had somebody working for her that stole some coke, but then tried to cover it up, and then she tried to cover up everything else after that. And again, we got people in the chat saying, "Yeah, prosecution record, Brady violation, absolutely, Brady violation. You can't have those Brady violations." She supported truancy laws that punished parents for not sending their kids to school. And she made fun of it on a video. She talked about this. And let's not forget a couple of her coup de grace that I've mentioned on several occasions. Number one, when Steve Mnuchin was the president of One West Bank, she failed to prosecute Stephen Mnuchin and One West Bank for illegally foreclosing on thousands of homes. And then when the bank bailouts came through by none other than Barack Obama and Joe Biden, Mnuchin not only cashed in on the bank bailouts, but then he also cashed in on the sale of those depressed assets or foreclosed homes. Kamala Harris failed to investigate the police shootings of 2 Black men during 2014 and 2015. And then she failed to appoint a special prosecutor that would have investigated those particular situations. But last but not least, when it comes to prison labor, Kamala Harris had prisoners that were in the jail for longer than their sentences. And then when they were in jail, when the wildfires took place, she paid them $1.45 per day to fight wildfires. Then when these prisoners got out of jail, when they were trained by the California State Police Department, they couldn't get jobs because of their criminal records.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't seem like it's a hidden fact that this administration is going to be, I mean, it's coming from the tough on crime era. It's going to be really, it's perpetuating the prison industrial complex. They love the prison industrial complex. And as we're going to see, the rest of these people do too. And this is an interesting time because of the attack on the Capitol that happened a couple of weeks ago. And I mean, Biden has already expressed that he's going to be implementing some security, measures in whatever way. I don't know if it's through a bill or whatever, or an act or whatever, but I mean, that to me is really scary because these people are he is coming from the era of being tough on crime. And we have seen since that time, I mean, I was a small child, but it's so obvious that the prison system is completely full of Black and brown people that, I mean, it's just racist. It's a racist system. It's structurally and institutionally racist. It upholds white supremacy. And these people are absolutely going to be perpetuating that and increasing that with this new fear that people can enact or they're going to be playing on that fear, I think.
Absolutely. And get ready for Patriot Act 2.0. That's coming. Yeah. And when you talk about this administration, specifically the two heads of the administration, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, enjoying the carceral state or the prison industrial complex. When we talk about Black and brown people being imprisoned, there's also Black and brown people being bombed on in the Middle East and in Africa. And Samantha Power is a person we need to discuss. Technically, she is not a member of the cabinet, but she is an important figure that needs to be discussed because she's the lead administrator for USAID, the United States Agency for International Development. She supported every single military intervention when she was the United Nations ambassador. The U.S. ambassador to the United Nations and a member of the National Security Council under Obama. She supported the war in Libya. She supported the war in Syria. She supported the war in Yemen. All of this is under Samantha Power. Samantha Power also, she could have stopped the situation in Yemen by saying, hey, look, this is a humanitarian crisis. We can't do this. But she didn't say anything. She said nothing about Saudi Arabia and the United States bombing Yemen and creating the famine and genocide that's taking place in Yemen right now. She was a staunch defender of all the war crimes that the United States committed, that Israel committed, and that Saudi Arabia committed. And she was concerned that EU countries like the UK were decreasing their military budgets. And during the 100th anniversary of the Armenian genocide, which happened back in 2005, she said nothing. Yeah. So Samantha Power, a complete warmonger, who was a remnant and a holdover and a leftover of the Obama administration, goes away for 4 years, comes back, and now she's the director of USAID. And this is after she was United States ambassador to the United Nations and was fully supportive of every single military intervention we've had around the world. Again, if you think you're getting something different now because we don't have Trump in the White House, keep listening, keep watching.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the important thing here is she'll be a part of the Agency for International Development, I read. And so what that means is the fact that she's a warmonger and loves the military, that's going to impact other countries vastly in this administration, in the sense that it's going to be perpetuating colonial everything, values, ideologies, everything, and on the ground. Because if you're a warmonger like this, you love the military and you're going to be imposing the colonial mindset of military intervention on all of the other places that we interact with around the world. And she's clearly already been practicing this with her previous positions, as you mentioned. Oh, you're muted again. So you're
Yeah, sorry
still
about
muted?
that.
Okay.
No, I'm
It's
good.
okay.
I'm good. You know, and
Yeah.
another person that we need to bring into this discussion, and this person is a member of the cabinet, is Neera Tanden. Neera Tanden.
Yeah.
Neera Tanden is now she and Kamala Harris have something in common. They both have an Indian mother. Now, Neera Tanden, both of Neera Tanden's parents were born in India. Kamala Harris has an Indian mother and a Jamaican father. Both of Neera Tanden's parents are Indian. So now we have a whole bunch of people that are going to use identity politics to say, hey, you know what? We have diversity. We have another Indian American in the White House. We have another Indian American that's part of the Biden cabinet, and same with Kamala Harris. Now, she's a director of the Office of Budget and Management, which is a hugely important position. Now, she was a staffer for Bill Clinton in 1992. She was a staffer for Obama in 2008. She was an advisor for Hillary Clinton in 2016. She helped Obama write the Affordable Care Act, and she was part of the crew that helped write the legislation for the public option, which would have been really useful in a time right now, especially in the middle of a pandemic, to give everybody health care. But then the Democrats negotiated that out of the ACA. She's also the founder for the Center for American Progress. Neera Tanden replaced John Podesta as the CEO for the Center for American Progress. Now, wait a minute. Why does the name John Podesta sound familiar? Because John Podesta had the Podesta emails under Hillary Clinton and WikiLeaks. And John Podesta has a couple of other connections to some of the other people that we're going to talk about in today's show. Neera Tanden opposes Medicare for all. She opposes a $15 minimum wage. And she supported Libya's bombing and suggested that Libya should pay back the United States with oil after we bombed them. So the United States bombs Libya, and then she goes ahead and says, yo, Libya, we bombed you. You owe us reparations because we bombed you. Pay us in oil. That's Neera Tanden.
Yeah, and I think you brought up a really good point, which is something that I wanted to express about this episode in general. So Biden's cabinet, or what it looks to be, is diverse. There's almost half women, and almost half of the people he's appointing are people of color, of various backgrounds or whatever, religions, etc., etc. Including Dr. Rachel Levine, which is the first openly trans federal official to win Senate confirmation, which is a really big deal. And I just want to say, like, representation matters. And I think that this is exactly what an administration should be doing, is implementing people, or, you know, putting people in office that actually represent the country, and as far as these identity markers. But you're totally right. These people are, you know, they're just long-time political actors that are going to be perpetuating the same shit that happened in Obama's administration and the same shit that happened in the Clinton administration. Like, these people are not new. They might be a new face to these particular positions, but I think we have to be careful when we're talking about how representation and the identity politics will be used in this administration, because these are dangerous people. And just because they, you know, represent certain particular groups, people of color, for example, like, that doesn't mean that they're going to be doing the job that the people need. The human beings, the communities, the states, all of the humans that live in the US and abroad, because they clearly, through the few people we've talked about so far, I mean, they're impacting not just you're impacting not just yourselves, it's the rest of the world. That's why I'd pay attention, because it impacts me as a Canadian.
Exactly, exactly. And again, just because you have a bunch of black faces in high places, that doesn't necessarily mean that those black faces are going to do anything of any substance for black people or indigenous people or other people of color. Take a look at Obama and his administration. Obama had 2 black attorney generals, but you had a whole bunch of black kids being shot by white cops.
Yeah.
Obama had Dr. Henry Louis Gates, a distinguished professor, I think, at Princeton University, was unlawfully arrested in front of his own house by a white police officer. Instead of excoriating the police officer and the police department that unlawfully arrested Dr. Gates, what did he do instead? He had a beer summit. And who was at that beer summit? Dr. Gates, Obama, the racist white cop, and none other than Joe Biden.
Surprise, surprise.
Surprise, surprise. Surprise, surprise. And again, when we talk about black faces in high places and the war machine, let's look no further than retired 4-star General Lloyd Austin. Lloyd Austin is going to be nominated as the Secretary of Defense. He is the first black Secretary of Defense. He retired from the Armed Forces in 2016. He is on the board of Raytheon, which is a defense contractor. He is on the board of Nucor, which is the largest steel producer in the United States. Now, I guarantee if you're going to build bombs, if you're going to build drones, and if you're going to build airplanes, and if you're going to build tanks, and if you're going to build battleships, having steel production will be quite important to those military objectives and endeavors. He is also on the board of Tenet Healthcare. Tenet Healthcare was involved in a Medicare fraud scandal that cost Tenet $925 million. And that happened in 2006. And that is just one healthcare scandal. There was another scandal involving Tenet Healthcare where they issued something like 60 unwarranted health surgeries. And they ended up having to pay a fine in the couple $100 million range. He is on the board of this organization, Lloyd Austin. And Tenet Health is also a major sponsor of none other than the Clinton Foundation. Go figure. Lloyd Austin led coalition forces in Iraq, and he asked for more troops when everyone else is saying, yo, come on, chill, send them and these troops home. He asked for more troops. So again, this is Lloyd Austin, first black guy that's going to be in the Secretary of Defense. He said, hey, you know what? Let's go ahead and spend a whole bunch of money training Syrians to defeat ISIL. How did that work out? Total failure. He's also a partner. We're going to mention this a few times in the episode. He is also a partner of Pine Island Capital, which is a venture capital firm that was founded by Anthony Blinken and Michelle Flournoy. And this venture capitalist firm helps people who have just recently left Washington, D.C. and Washington, D.C. appointments work with other businesses and other corporations to secure government tracks and deal with other types of risk management and consulting. It's a rather shady organization, and we'll talk about that more later on. He also supported expanding family detention, he supported accelerating deportations, and approved hundreds of drone strikes. This is Lloyd Austin, again, blackface in a high place, that's willing to bomb brown people in the Middle East. Now, Austin's appointment is a curious appointment because you have to be out of the government for 7 years. You have to be out of the military for 7 years before you could go into government. So Austin would need a congressional waiver to do that. He would need a congressional waiver to go back into government. There's some question as to whether he's going to get that waiver or not. And again, we've mentioned Michelle Flournoy. Michelle Flournoy was Obama's Pentagon policy chief and one of the principal founders of Pine Island Capital, along with Tony Blinken. And Tony Blinken is now Biden's Secretary of State. He's the next person we should get into because, again, he's Tony Blinken. Tony Blinken is now going to be Biden's Secretary of State. He was a Deputy National Security Advisor and Deputy Secretary of State under Obama. He was a member of the National Security Staff under Bill Clinton. So again, we're looking at all of these retreads and people are saying, yo, we got new faces. We got a diverse cabinet. No, you don't. You got the same assholes in the government that moved the country right under the Democratic Party. Now, he's also the founder of West Exec Advisors. And you're probably like, brother Joe, What is West Exec Advisors? I've never heard of this. Of course you haven't, because a lot of people don't know about them unless you're in Washington, D.C. They're a shady consulting firm made up of former Obama officials that help consult corporations to get government contracts, and they help supply them with military information and strategic consulting. They don't register as lobbyists, because if you're registered as lobbyists, you can't go back into the government right away. So if you don't register as a lobbyist, you could go from being a private employee or a private citizen, can go right back into government without any sort of delays at all. So that revolving door of government, private business, government consulting, government, private business goes right through. Now, some of West Exec's clients include Windward. They're an Israeli artificial intelligence firm. They also consulted with Shield. They're an artificial intelligence firm that also operates as a drone surveillance company. Now, this is the guy, Tony Blinken, with all of this security state expertise, and he is now the head of the State Department of the United States of America. A little bit more, Tony Blinken's father was a former United States ambassador to Hungary and a former investment banker with a company called Warburg Pincus. Now, we might have mentioned Warburg Pincus in the Wall Street and the White House episode. Now, Warburg Pincus is a private equity firm. Now, care to guess who the president of Warburg Pincus is right now?
I'm gonna guess this guy Blinken.
No, but it's somebody that I'm fairly certain that we mentioned in the Wall Street and the White House episode. None other than Timothy Geithner.
Oh, okay.
Right, we mentioned Timothy Geithner. Timothy Geithner was Obama's Secretary of the Treasury, and he oversaw the bank bailouts under the TARP program, the Troubled Asset Relief Program. Okay, and TARP is essentially the big bailout that bailed out the banks. And then he oversaw the bonus payments to AIG executives. So Timothy Geithner. So again, you're seeing this web of corruption between the Obama administration, the Clinton administration. We're seeing people that this revolving door of private and public government and consulting going right back together to the highest levels of public service in the United States.
Yeah, I really appreciate that you pointed that out, that that it's so interconnected and intertwined and is a web of just like this revolving door, because that's exactly what it is. These are all people that have been in the establishment and surrounding these positions for a long, long time. This is nothing new, and the bureaucracy is going to be exactly the same. This is it's almost unfortunate, because in 2016, when Trump was elected, I feel as though a lot of that had to do with the anti-establishment sentiment that Hillary Clinton represented. And now this is just, further deepening that, you've just elected the most establishment, people. Like this is just going to further deepen the establishment. I don't know what the word is that I'm looking for, but you know what I mean. Like it's just it's the pendulum has swung farther back, and it's just the same old shit again.
It's the same people. It's the same people, and these are the same people when Trump almost 4 years ago to the day said, "I'm going to drain the swamp." He didn't drain the swamp. Drain the swamp. What he did is he went from a swamp to really a pit of quicksand, because the people that were in his administration were wholly unqualified, and they ended up sinking his presidency. What you have right now are the worst elements of the swamp that is Washington, D.C.
Exactly.
So what you have with Trump was the most non-establishment president we've ever seen. What we have now with Biden, under the cloak and clandestine operatives of diversity and inclusion, is you have more of the same shit. But you just have places, you have gender politics and identity politics masking all of it. It's a joke. It's a joke. It's a joke.
Yeah.
And another person that's a part of this entire security state is Avril Haines. Avril Haines is the director of national intelligence under Biden. She's a former deputy national security advisor under Obama. She was deputy director of the CIA. And care to guess who she replaced as deputy national security advisor under Obama?
I have no idea.
None other than Tony Blinken. She replaced
Oh,
Tony Blinken. She
of
replaced Tony
course.
Blinken, the famed political comedian George Carlin said it's one big club and you ain't in it. Take a look at what we have here. This is one big club and none of us are in it. And they are the club. There was a torture report that was written back in 2015. The torture report was 6,700 pages or so. Avril Haines hid 6,200 pages of that torture report. She supported the plan for targeted drone strikes. She supported a plan for regime change in North Korea using military intervention. She was a consultant for Palantir Technologies, and Palantir Technologies was a data mining firm that helped the Trump administration with immigrant detention programs. She was also a former employee and an executive of West Exec Advisors. And wait a minute, who were the two heads of West Exec Advisors? Michelle Flournoy and Tony Blinken. And wait a minute, who was also involved with West Exec Advisors? Lloyd Austin. So are you seeing all the connections? And there's more of this. We have another 14 minutes left. There's a whole lot more we're going to get into.
Yeah, oh my gosh. And that's the thing, is like all of these people, once you kind of dig into this is so deeply connected to, you know, just the establishment. The government is just so deeply entrenched in this like web of, you know, like the House of Cards, you know, analogy. It's like they're so out of touch. We talked about this a whole bunch in a couple of the episodes that we have already recorded. But yeah, I mean, it's just these people are not looking out for the average American. There's like no thought in their mind that actually thinks about or relates to an average American person. And that is, you know, just so apparent when we're looking at these picks for the administration. There's a few more people that we have to get to. We might not get to everybody, but I wanted to mention Pete Buttigieg is going to be the Secretary of Transportation. We all kind of remember Pete. He ran for president. He's a former mayor. Unsuccessfully, yeah, in 2020. And he's a former mayor of South Bend, Indiana. He had that, I guess, scandal of, you know, the reappointed police chief. He reappointed the police chief after racism had been recorded within the police department, and then someone reported it. And it led to questions about how Buttigieg is upholding white supremacy, which is clearly the case, given his history. And I think the main point that I wanted to mention here is, as the Secretary of Transportation, he's going to be in charge of major infrastructure projects, and that means he's going to be addressing environmental issues within the climate crisis, like himself. I don't know if he's qualified for that. This is a real big job, and that's I honestly I highly doubt that this is going to go well. It's not going to be, you know, the intervention we need for the climate crisis is far more vast than what this administration is going to be able to provide.
I agree. And again, he's another one of these picks that fills out the diversity initiatives for this cabinet, because he is openly gay. He's openly gay. He's married. His partner, I think, is a lawyer, if I'm not mistaken. He's openly gay. And we've talked about Dr. Rachel Levine being the first openly transgender, I think, Assistant Secretary for Health and Human Services, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's what it was. And now we got Mayor Pete, who's openly gay. And you don't always hear about members of a cabinet being openly gay. He is openly gay. And again, Mayor Pete's father was, I think, a professor at, I want to say Notre Dame, if I'm not mistaken. is a distinguished professor at Notre Dame, which makes sense because Notre Dame is in South Bend, Indiana, so that actually does make sense. But yeah, these people they're not your friends. They are not your friends. And another person who is not your friend, but played like she was, is Gina Raimondo. We've talked about Gina Raimondo in the Wall Street and the White House episode, and I'll rehash this information again because it's worth repeating. Gina Raimondo is now the Secretary of Commerce. She is the former governor of Rhode Island, which is the smallest state in the land. She typically has she's had the lowest approval ratings of any governor over the past 4 years. She is a former venture capitalist on Wall Street. She became governor of Rhode Island through millions and millions of dollars of Wall Street contributions. She was a former Rhode Island treasurer, and when she was a former Rhode Island treasurer, she cut pension benefits, she halted pay increases, and through the Rhode Island Security Act of 2011, that act transferred $1 billion to Wall Street hedge funds. $1 billion to Wall Street hedge funds. Gina Raimondo, whose salary, I think, as governor is about $115,000, and as a Secretary of Commerce, that's a senior executive level position when the government, so she's probably going to make about $250,000 a year. She is a centimillionaire. She is worth over 300 million American dollars. Explain to me how a lady who works as a governor making about 130 grand a year with all the other fringe benefits has a net worth of over $300 million. And that person is now the Secretary of Commerce. But wait a minute. Nothing nefarious, nothing to see here.
Yeah. I mean, Yellen, I can't remember the first name of this person, but Mrs. Yellen.
Janet
Thank
Yellen.
you.
You're welcome.
More of the same, exactly the same. Secretary of Treasury, she's nominated for. Previously served as the chair of the Council of Economic Advisors and chair of the Federal Reserve. Rich person, like, it's just more of the same. Like, these people are not in touch with anything because their bottom line is about wealth accumulation, and they're already wealthy. And so these people's policies are going to reflect that and like disregard anything else that is even a possibility because they don't understand what poverty is. They don't. One last person that I just wanted to mention too is Tom Vilsack. He's going to be the Secretary of Agriculture.
Yes.
Same job that he is going to get with Biden, he had with Obama for 8 years. Mm-hmm. He's the founder and former chair of the Governor's Biotechnology Partnership and was named Governor of the Year by the Biotechnology Industry Organization, which is an industry lobbying group, which should tell you everything you need to know. Mm-hmm. Lobbyists love him, so guess what? He's not actually going to, do anything good for the planet in the environmental crisis, the climate crisis. He's all for big agriculture, which is a huge, huge issue that we're going to have to talk about in one of the future episodes.
In fact, he's basically next week's episode because we're doing next week's episode about the environment.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, I mean, when I was reading about him, he's basically a climate change denier because his defense is, he thinks that the agriculture industry was blamed for contributing a lot of the contributing to greenhouse gases. And he says it's actually just like such a small percentage. But that is absolutely not true. The big agriculture is a huge contributor to greenhouse gases, which therefore contributes to global warming and the climate crisis. So again, it's just these establishment people that love big business. They love war. They love, just
prison, locking people up.
Yes, prison industrial complex, military industrial complex. These are people that are not going to do anything good for, the actual human beings that live in this world, except for themselves, the small group of people that are elites.
Exactly. This tiny cabal of people that are in this office. And the person that was actively lobbying for that job was a lady named Marcia Fudge. She's a Democratic representative of Ohio, and she's actually qualified with dealing with people who work in farms and agriculture. She, a Black woman, was given the position of the Department of Health Housing and Urban Development, HUD, which is typically a role that Black people have typically occupied. Take a look at the previous administration. The one person of color, other than Elaine Chao, who is Mitch McConnell's wife, that is in the Trump administration, is Ben Carson. Ben Carson is a former neurosurgeon. He knows nothing about housing. So now you're going to put a lady who knows about agriculture and put her in HUD. Again, there's a few people in the administration, a few Black people in the administration who got positions but are not the best fit for those positions. And the people who Biden put in these positions that are typically more highly regarded and more powerful are white guys. And I'm specifically saying white guys, because when you talk about senior advisory positions, like the chief of staff, which is held by Ron Klain, like deputy chief of staff, which is held by Bruce Reed, which counselors positions to the president, which is held by Steve Ricchetti, a senior advisor position by Mike Donilon, and the national security advisor by Jake Sullivan. That is the sort of inner circle brain trust of Joe Biden. What do those five guys have in common? They are all mediocre white guys. All of them. Every single last one of them. And let's go over some of them. Steve Ricchetti was Biden's chief of staff during the Obama administration. He was Clinton's deputy chief of staff. During the 8 years between Clinton and Obama, Steve Ricchetti worked as a lobbyist. He replaced John Podesta. Wait a minute, that name sounds familiar. He replaced John Podesta as Clinton's deputy chief of staff. That's who Steve Ricchetti is. Steve Ricchetti also helped you to write the Telecommunications Act of 1996. And you're like, wait a minute, Joe, I've heard about this. The reason you have 6 media companies that are all corporate owned that control over 90% of what you read, hear, and see is because of the Telecommunication Act of 1996. And Steve Ricchetti is a major architect of that act. Mike Donilon is another one of these brain trusts that serves at the behest of Joe Biden. He's been an advisor to Biden since 1981. So over the past 40 years, he's been working with Joe Biden. His brother is Tom Donilon, and that name might sound familiar to some political insiders. Why? Because Tom Donilon was Bill Clinton's chief of staff and a national security advisor under Obama. And Mike Donilon is the reason why we have slogans and phrases like soul of a nation. We're going to fight for the soul of the nation, and we're going to fight to make America better again. That is Mike Donilon. Ron Klain is another one of these political operatives, served under Obama, served under Clinton. Jake Sullivan, who was a former Hillary Clinton aide. So again, the people that we have in the highest levels of government, none of these people are new. All of them are corrupt. And if you think you're getting anything different because you have a few Black faces and a few women of color and a few women and a few Jewish people in the organization, you are sadly mistaken. Just because Trump hired a bunch of buffoons at the highest levels of government and he said he's going to drain the swamp and it ended up being his quicksand, doesn't mean that Biden is going to drain the swamp. In fact, Biden has created a swamp that has created more swamp creatures rather than draining the swamp.
Yeah, I mean, Biden is a swamp creature, and so he's going to surround himself with the swamp creatures, as you say. And I really appreciate that you brought that up too, because not only does it really demonstrate, what we've been saying for the last hour almost, but like, yes, representation matters, but the people that are in positions that actually matter, it's these 5 people you just went over. Those are the mediocre white men that he's surrounding himself with and putting in the most powerful positions, and that's what matters. So yes, absolutely, representation matters, and I actually am genuinely happy that this cabinet is diverse in the sense that there is representation of many different kinds of people, because typically it's just white men. So that is great, and that's an amazing thing for people to see and to have. It's friggin' 2021, for goodness sake. Like, we need that. But again, these are all just establishment, long-standing establishment people, pardon me, that are not going to change anything. In fact, they're going to make life probably a bit harder for for people, because all of these people are going to just move the political situation further to the right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Kat, we got about 45 seconds left. We
Oh my
are
goodness.
almost out of time.
Oh my goodness, Joe. Thank you so much. I can't
You're
believe
very
we
welcome.
covered almost everything that we wanted to talk about today, but
We get
thank
it
you
done.
so much. It's
Thank
always
you
a
so
pleasure.
much. It is always mine. And next
Next,
week's episode, the environment, we're going to talk about it. It's important. We live on a planet that is dying. Ecocide is a big deal. We need to recycle. We need to save our planet. We need to live more sustainably. And we're going to talk about environmental issues, factory farming, and all of that next week on episode number 33 of the Joe and Kat Chats.
Yeah, thanks again. Looking forward to it. And goodbye, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.
Peace.